The dishwasher beeped, and I flinched like it had screamed. That's how empty the house has become. A single sound startles me. Not because it's loud, but because it breaks the silence I've been living in for the past 7 months. 7 months and 2 days to be exact. But who's counting? Me. I am. I count everything now. The text she didn't send, the minutes I stared at the hallway hoping to hear her keys. I even count how many times I've opened the same cabinet looking for something that isn't there anymore. Like hope. Or dignity. She left quietly. No screaming. No apology. She just said one thing. One thing that keeps echoing in my bones every night like it's stitched into my skin. Merritt, I feel nothing for you. Not anger. Not pain. Just nothing. Like I was a hotel she stayed in too long. Like she was overdue for a better view. That same night, she posted a photo of a sunset with the caption, "Finally breathing again." Meanwhile, I couldn't even find my slippers. And what did I do? What any self-respecting man would have done, I guess. I stood in the garage half in a panic attack, half whispering to a box of old Christmas decorations, trying to remember what my life felt like before I became this leftover. I wore her favorite shirt the next 3 days straight. Still smelled like her. Until it didn't. Then I just wore it because I didn't know what else to wear. My neighbors started knocking less. My coworkers started asking, "You good?" With a tone that meant, "Please don't cry again." My brother said, "You need to move on." But from what? From being discarded like expired milk? Here's the part no one wants to admit. It's not the leaving that breaks you. It's the silence after. It's realizing they packed up your world like it was their suitcase. And just when I thought she'd erased me from her memory, she showed up. Not in person. No, that would have required courage. She showed up in a message. A single message. "Saw you today. Didn't expect that." That's all it said. No punctuation. No emoji. No "how are you?" But I knew what she meant. She saw me. With someone else. I was at the farmer's market with Talia. A woman I met at therapy. Yes, therapy. I still go. Every Thursday at 4. It's the only place where I feel like I exist. Talia was laughing at something stupid I said about peach cobbler. I hadn't heard myself laugh in months. And yet there it was. This stupid, broken sound from my chest like my body remembered joy before I did. And she saw it. The woman who once told me I was invisible to her, now suddenly wanted to watch me again. I didn't answer her message. Not because I didn't want to, but because I had nothing left to give her. The irony? Now she's the one watching my stories. Liking old posts. Sending me memes we used to laugh at. And I'm still trying to figure out whether it's revenge I want, or just one night where I don't fall asleep wondering if I was really that easy to forget. This isn't a comeback story. Not yet. But something is changing. And it's not her. It's me. I stared at her message for hours without opening it. Just one line. No context. No punctuation. No explanation. "Saw you today. Didn't expect that." It sat there like a ghost on my screen, haunting me in plain sight. My thumb hovered over it more times than I'll admit, but I couldn't bring myself to click. Because I knew the second I did, I'd fall right back into the black hole she left behind. I'd start trying to read between the words, search for warmth in a sentence colder than the air in my apartment. And yet, that one text managed to tear open everything I had spent months trying to tape back together. I wish I could say I shrugged it off, but I didn't. I walked back and forth through my place like it had answers in the corners, whispering, "Why now?" to no one. It made me question the little piece I was starting to build, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I hadn't told Talia about Kala. Not really. She knew I was divorced, knew it was messy, but I never went into detail. I guess I didn't want to bleed that history into something new, fragile as it was. But now the past was creeping into the present like a slow leak under the floorboards, and I was already slipping. That night, I dreamt I was back in our old kitchen. Kala was sitting at the counter, swirling her wine like she always did when she was pretending to listen. She looked up and said it again. "I feel nothing for you." Only this time she said it like she was amused, like it was a joke, like she enjoyed the way it shattered me. I woke up gasping. My shirt was soaked through, but not with sweat. I had been crying. Again. I should have ignored the message. That's what strong people do, right? They cut off what hurts them. They build walls and throw away keys. But I'm not strong. I'm Merritt, the man who still watches her old Spotify playlists like they're coated with secrets. The man who still keeps her chipped coffee mug in the back of the cupboard like some kind of emotional hostage. So of course I answered. Yeah, I was with someone. That's all I said. But even that single line made my chest tighten like I'd committed some betrayal. She read it instantly. Of course she did. Then came the next message, 2 dots of hesitation. Then this. You seemed happy. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Seemed? As if happiness was a trick of the light. As if the version of me smiling next to Talia was some artificial thing. Not the same man who used to beg for her affection like a dog waiting for a pat on the head. I didn't reply. I went to sleep angry, confused, and ashamed that one broken sentence from her still had the power to unravel me. But the next day it got worse. She showed up. I was leaving my therapy session, the one on Thursdays at 4, and there she was, standing next to her car in the parking lot, like she'd been rehearsing the moment for weeks. Hair tied back, sunglasses on, hands shaking just enough for me to notice. Merritt, she said. Like we hadn't stopped speaking 7 months ago, like I hadn't spent every one of those months dying in pieces. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I think part of me expected her to vanish if I stayed still long enough. I just wanted to see you. For real. Not just on a screen. And then she said the one thing I never expected. I think I made a mistake. That sentence, short and soft, knocked the air out of me harder than when she said she felt nothing. Because this sentence had weight. It had regret. It had too many what-ifs wrapped in it. And I knew if I let it in, it would start bleeding into everything I had tried to rebuild. I said nothing. She took a step closer. I don't want to mess things up for you, she continued, her voice cracking. I didn't think seeing you happy would hurt this much. And there it was. Not love. Not apology. Just jealousy. And that, somehow, felt worse than all the silence in the world. I've played that parking lot moment in my head at least 100 times. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was the first time she looked more broken than me. Calla, the woman who once spoke about me like I was a slow leak in her joy, stood there with her hands trembling, her voice raw, eyes brimming like she hadn't cried since the day she left. And maybe she hadn't, but I had. I cried enough for both of us. I had wept on the kitchen floor over laundry that smelled like her. I had stared at the corner of the bed she used to curl up in and wondered what made me so easy to walk away from. And in that moment, standing in front of her again, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not hope, not longing, resentment. I wanted to yell. I wanted to scream. You don't get to hurt and come back. You don't get to miss me now that I finally remember how to breathe without you. But I couldn't. Because I was still me, still Merritt, still the guy who apologizes for holding pain too long, who folds instead of fights, who listens even when the words burn. She waited for me to speak. Her eyes flicked to mine and back down, like she was ashamed of needing me to say something kind. I took a deep breath. I thought maybe I could keep it civil, short, safe. I'm seeing someone, I said, even though the words felt like a lie. Talia and I weren't a thing, not officially. We were healing in each other's presence. But I needed Calla to hear it. She nodded like she'd expected it, but her jaw clenched. She was trying so hard to stay composed. But she wasn't fooling me. I'm not here to ruin anything, she whispered, barely audible. I wanted to tell you something. Something I should have said before I left. The air between us went still. She bit her lip and exhaled like she was afraid of her own confession. The day I told you I felt nothing? That wasn't entirely true. My chest tightened. I stared at her like she had just admitted to burying a body under our old backyard. She glanced around the parking lot. We were still standing next to our cars, like two strangers in a moment that didn't belong to the real world. I was angry, she continued. I was confused. Elliot, he was... She trailed off, looking disgusted with herself. It wasn't real, Merritt. He made me feel seen for 5 minutes, and I thought that was enough to burn everything down. Elliot, the man I had never met but fantasized about punching in the face. The man who wrote poems to her in the comments of her photos while I was at home making her dinner. The man who, according to her, understood her soul. Yeah, that guy. I nodded slowly, pretending her words didn't slice through me like thin wire. I was cruel to you, she said, and her voice cracked in a way that startled both of us. And you didn't deserve that. You were the one person who loved me without needing me to perform for it. And I threw it away like it was nothing. I should have walked away. I should have gotten in my car, driven off, and left her to sit in her guilt like I'd sat in my grief. But I didn't. I just stood there, heart pounding, mouth dry, trying to find something in myself that felt like peace. I don't want you back, she added quickly. I just needed you to know I was wrong. Completely, stupidly wrong. Her eyes locked with mine. It wasn't a look of manipulation. It wasn't romantic. It was hollow. Honest. Maybe even brave in its own pathetic way. And in that moment, I realized something darker than anger had taken root in me. I wanted her to hurt more. I wanted her to feel every ounce of abandonment I had swallowed silently for months. I hated that about myself. But it was real. I'm happy now, I said, slowly, deliberately, like I was convincing myself more than her. And I don't need an apology to move forward. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. She nodded, wiped her cheek, and turned away. But before she stepped into her car, she looked back. You look better, she whispered. Stronger. I always knew you would be. And then she drove off. And I stood there for 10 minutes, staring at the empty space she left behind, wondering why her compliment hurt more than her silence ever did. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling like it owed me an explanation. I kept replaying her voice, the way it shook when she said I was wrong. It should have meant something. Closure, maybe? Validation. But it just felt like someone tapping on the window of a house that had already burned down. And the worst part? I wanted her to say more. I wanted her to crack wide open and tell me everything, how he made her feel when she stopped loving me, when she decided I wasn't enough. I wanted the ugly truth in full detail, even if it shattered me. Because that would have at least made my pain make sense. But that's not what she gave me. She gave me half an apology in a parking lot and then drove away like she hadn't just detonated 6 months of barely stitched together healing. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I sat in my car outside Talia's place and stared at her front door for nearly an hour before finally knocking. She opened it wearing that oversized navy sweater that made her look like peace personified. I didn't say anything. Just collapsed into her arms like I was finally admitting that I wasn't as okay as I pretended to be. Talia wasn't a rebound. I didn't fall for her because she was the opposite of Kala. I fell for her because she didn't flinch when I fell apart. She didn't try to fix me. She just stayed. And that, to a man who had been abandoned without warning, felt like a revolution. We talked that day, really talked. I told her about the parking lot. About the message. About how hearing I made a mistake didn't feel victorious. It felt like being handed back your broken heart in a paper bag and asked to recycle it into something functional. Talia listened. She didn't interrupt. She just placed her hand on mine and said she doesn't know you anymore. She only remembers the version of you she left behind. That hit me harder than I expected. Because it was true. Kala still saw me as the man who bent, who begged, who waited at the window and made excuses for her coldness. She hadn't seen this version of me, the one who finally knew what it felt like to be heard, to be held, to be loved without earning it like a reward for suffering. And I started to wonder what would happen if she did. That weekend, Talia and I went to a small gathering her sister hosted, a backyard thing with string lights and music too soft to dance to. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like a shadow. I laughed. I talked. I let people ask me questions without shrinking. I felt real. Then the unexpected happened. Kala showed up. She wasn't invited, not directly. But her best friend Darcy was there, and apparently she tagged along last minute. When she saw me across the yard, her whole body stiffened. Her hand clutched her wine glass like she was holding her breath. I froze. Talia noticed. She leaned into me, whispered, "Is that her?" And when I nodded, she didn't ask anything else. She just looped her arm through mine and guided me forward like it was any other Saturday night. But Kala didn't look away. She stared like she was seeing a ghost, one she didn't expect to be, smiling. For a while, we stayed in our corners. Me with Talia. Her with her glass. And then, as people began to drift around, the space between us got smaller. Eventually, she approached. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, same line as the text, like it was the only script she knew how to use. I smiled, not to be polite, but because I realized something in that moment. She wasn't holding power anymore. She was trying to recognize a version of me that didn't need her recognition. "This is Talia," I said, introducing her with a kind of casual warmth that used to be reserved for Kala. "She saved my life, in case you're wondering." Talia smiled. Kala didn't. There was a flicker in her eyes. Something tight. Something lost. "She's lovely," Kala said, though the compliment barely cleared her throat. And then she did something I didn't see coming. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to me. I was going to mail this, but I figured, since you're here. I looked down at it. No name, just a smudge where her fingers had gripped too hard. I didn't open it. Not then. Not while she watched. I simply said, "Take care of yourself," and walked away. I didn't look back, but I felt her watching. The man she left behind, the one who used to whisper apologies in the silence, was gone. And she knew it. The envelope sat unopened on my dresser for 2 full days. I moved it once, then moved it back. I considered burning it, ripping it in half, dropping it in the mailbox labeled "Return to Sender," even though no address was written. But I couldn't. Something about the weight of it, not just physically but emotionally, made me treat it like it contained a confession that could snap the spine of everything I'd rebuilt. Talia didn't ask about it. She saw it, sure. She's observant like that. But she knew I needed space to figure out how to deal with the last ghost Kala had left behind. She never tried to compete with the past, never demanded I hurry through the pain, and maybe that's what made her feel more real than anything Kala had ever given me. But still, the envelope lingered, like a question I was too afraid to answer. Late on the second night, I finally opened it. My hands were shaking, and I hated that. I hated that a single piece of folded paper could still reduce me to that man again. The one who waited at the window, the one who searched for clues in shadows. But I unfolded it anyway. The handwriting was familiar. Soft cursive, slightly slanted right, the same loops I used to watch her sketch on grocery lists and sticky notes. Only this time, there was no shopping to do, just wounds to reopen. "Merritt, you're not supposed to read this in front of me. If you are, I'm sorry. I didn't have the courage to say it to your face, so I wrote it instead. That's what I do. I retreat when it matters most. You probably hate me, and if you don't, then I'm sure you should. I've gone over every moment between us in my mind, like rewinding a film, frame by frame, wondering where it went wrong. I used to think it was you. Your quietness, your routines, your gentle love I couldn't feel anymore. But it wasn't you. It was me. I mistook peace for boredom. I mistook safety for stagnation. I mistook your patience for weakness. And worst of all, I mistook Elliot's attention for love. It wasn't. It was adrenaline. It was escape. It was a fantasy that only looked good because I hadn't yet paid the price for it. I started seeing him long before I admitted it to myself. I told myself we were just talking. Then we were just laughing. Then it was just one kiss. You never saw the decline. You were too busy loving me like I was still someone worth loving. I told you I felt nothing because I was trying to convince myself that it wasn't my fault. But it was. It was. And I see that now. I know you've probably moved on. And I know you deserve to. But please believe me when I say, I never forgot the way you held me in my worst moments. I never forgot how safe you made me feel, even if I resented that safety. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. But if you ever doubt your worth because of me, don't. You were never the problem. I just didn't know how to love someone who didn't make me chase my own reflection. I'm sorry, Kala. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I couldn't believe she'd actually said it. Admitted it. Owned it. In a twisted way, it felt like the thing I had wanted most. A validation, an acknowledgement, proof that I wasn't crazy for hurting all this time. And yet, it didn't fix anything. It didn't unbreak me. It didn't unmake the nights I spent in the dark, replaying the coldness in her voice when she said she felt nothing. Still, I cried. Not for her. Not even for us. I cried for the man I used to be, The one who bent over backward trying to be enough for someone who had already mentally checked out. I cried for the version of me that thought love had to be earned through endurance. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the back of the drawer I used to keep my wedding ring in. Not out of nostalgia, but because it no longer had power over me. The next morning, I didn't tell Talia about the letter right away, but something in me had shifted. I kissed her slower, held her longer, and when she asked me what I was thinking, I said something I never thought I'd hear myself say again. I think I might finally be okay. But fate or irony or cruelty wasn't quite done with me yet. Because that afternoon, Calla showed up again. Not to talk, not to beg, but to tell me something that would change everything. I heard the knock before I saw her face. Except it wasn't really a knock, it was more of a hesitant tap, like someone unsure if they had the right door or the right to be there at all. I was halfway through making a pot of coffee, standing barefoot in a t-shirt that didn't belong to me, Talia's, ironically, when I opened the door and there she was. Calla. But not like before. This time, she wasn't wearing that curated neutral smile she always used when she wanted to appear composed. She looked pale. Stiff. Her hands were clutching the strap of her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Can I talk to you? She asked, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond at first. Not because I was angry, but because I was tired. So deeply bonesick tired of this pattern she kept initiating without any understanding of what it cost me to sit through it. But there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not regret. Not longing. Something closer to panic. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, scanning the apartment like it had changed without her, which of course it had. There were photos now. A vase with dried lavender on the shelf. Talia's book on the coffee table. The home had grown a heartbeat again, one she didn't recognize. One that didn't beat for her anymore. Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, she started. But this can't wait. And I didn't know who else. Get to it, Calla, I interrupted, sharper than I intended. Please. I don't have the capacity for circles today. She swallowed hard, then reached into her bag. My heart sank. Not another letter. But it wasn't a letter. It was a photo. She placed it on the table, and for a moment I just stared at it, confused. It was a sonogram. I looked at her. My mind scrambled to make sense of it. Her lips parted. Her eyes were already glistening. It's not what you think, she said, and then immediately corrected herself. Actually, maybe it is. Time stopped. My blood went cold. I didn't know, she said quickly. I swear, I didn't know when I left. But I found out 2 months after. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd hate me even more. I sat down. Hard. Like my knees had given up. I'm pregnant. I said, more to myself than her. She nodded slowly. But I thought you were with. My throat closed. I was, she said quietly. But the timeline, it's not him, Merritt. I know it's not. It's you. The room felt like it was spinning. My hands trembled as I picked up the sonogram again, like the image might change if I held it long enough. She kept talking, her voice breaking. I was going to keep it from you. I thought it was punishment I deserved. But after seeing you at that party, I couldn't carry this anymore. I had to tell you. I had to give you the choice I stole. My stomach turned. Everything I'd fought to let go of, every piece of healing, every inch of distance, was collapsing under the weight of that photo. And for a brief, flickering moment, the old part of me, the one who once waited by the door and wrote her birthday cards with paragraphs of love she no longer read, wanted to rush toward her. To hold her. To protect what was ours, even if we weren't anymore. But I didn't move. I looked up, blinking through the noise in my head, and said the first thing that felt real. I don't know what to do with this, Calla. She nodded. Tears were now running silently down her face. I'm not here to ask for anything, she whispered. Not forgiveness. Not a second chance. I needed you to know. Because whatever happens next, you deserve the truth. Even if it's late. And just like that, she walked out. No hug. No lingering glances. No manipulation. Just the truth. Late, fragile, and trembling in my hands. And I sat there, holding a black and white image of a future I never planned for and didn't know if I could trust. The apartment was silent after she left, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that buzzed like something unnatural, something wrong. I sat on the couch for almost an hour, just staring at the sonogram on the table like it was some kind of cursed artifact. Part of me wanted to destroy it. Rip it up. Erase the memory of her shaking hands, placing it down like a confession. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, couldn't look away. Because that fuzzy little blur was real. It existed. And if what she said was true, it was mine. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text Talia. I couldn't. What was I even supposed to say? Hey, just found out my ex-wife is pregnant and it might be mine. Want to talk about it over dinner? The words felt radioactive. I couldn't bring them into the light without watching everything else burn down around them. I barely slept that night. I lay awake listening to every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows, like the world was trying to remind me that I was alive, even if I felt like I wasn't. My brain kept running in circles. When exactly would it have happened? The week before she left? The night she cried after our last dinner together, when I thought we were reconnecting, when I stupidly thought maybe we weren't broken yet. I remembered that night vividly now. She had come home early from one of her art meetups, said she was tired, and crawled into bed next to me for the first time in weeks. We didn't talk much. We just existed together quietly. And later we were intimate. Not passionate. Just human. I remember whispering, "Thank you for not giving up on us," and her not replying. I thought she was just tired. Now I wonder if she was already halfway out the door in her head. So yes, the timing tracked. It could be mine. But the cruelest part of all was that even now, even with all the betrayal and silence and late apologies, a small part of me wanted it to be mine. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I wanted a child. But because if something good came out of all this suffering, then maybe, just maybe, the pain had a point. By morning, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't sit in purgatory forever. I sent one text. To her. "If you're telling the truth, then we need a paternity test. Soon." She replied within a minute. I agree. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't warm. Just plain, sharp honesty. That felt new. It felt like she had finally stopped trying to manage me like a fragile object. And maybe that, in some twisted way, was growth. But things were about to get more complicated. Because I hadn't told Talia. And that night, she came over with takeout, books, and the warmth that had become so familiar it scared me. I didn't want to ruin it. But I also couldn't lie. So halfway through dinner, while she was laughing about a story from her sister's job, I cut her off. "There's something I have to tell you." She stopped mid-bite. Her smile softened and she leaned back. "Okay," she said calmly, placing her fork down. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every word before I even spoke them. "Kala came by yesterday." Her eyes twitched, but she stayed still. "She's pregnant. She says it's mine." The silence between us thickened instantly, like fog rolling in. Her eyes didn't leave mine. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just looked at me hard. "Do you believe her?" I paused. "I don't know. Do you want it to be true?" I hesitated too long. Part of me thinks it would make all the pain worth something. She nodded slowly, then stood up, walked to the window, arms folded across her chest. I didn't follow. I didn't beg. I let her process. Finally, she turned around. "Okay," she said. "But if this is happening, Merritt, I need you to decide who you're going to be through it. The man who still keeps one foot in the past, or the one who's finally stepping into something new." That sentence cut deeper than anything Kala had said. Because it was the truth. The real truth. The kind of truth that doesn't just sting, it forces you to change. I sat in that moment, realizing I was standing on a line that could reshape my entire future, with one woman carrying my history and another quietly offering me a life I never thought I'd be strong enough to have. And I hadn't even begun to realize that the hardest part was still coming. Because what Kala did next would make me question everything I thought I had learned. The morning of the paternity test, I didn't feel like myself. I stood in front of the mirror, tying the same knot in my shirt collar 3 times, but the reflection felt like someone I barely knew. This was the man who had crawled out of grief, rebuilt something from the rubble, only to find himself face to face with the very past he'd been running from. And yet, I didn't feel broken. Kala waited for me in the clinic lobby, looking as nervous as I'd ever seen her. No makeup, just a sweater 2 sizes too big, sleeves pulled over her hands like she was trying to disappear into it. She looked like a version of herself I'd never met before, unguarded, unsure, and human in a way that caught me off guard. We didn't talk much. We went through the swabs, the forms, the quiet tension. At one point, she reached out and touched my wrist, not romantically, just gently. "Thank you for showing up," she said. I nodded. I didn't smile, but I appreciated it. The results would take a few days. But what they confirmed didn't matter as much as I thought it would. Because that evening, when I told Talia everything, how the test went, how Kala had been, how I felt weirdly, still, she didn't pull away. She didn't flinch. She just sat next to me on the couch, took my hand, and said, "No matter what that paper says, Merritt, it doesn't define who you are." And I broke. Not into tears. Not into panic. But into stillness. A deep, soul-level stillness. Like I had finally put down a bag I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years. 3 days later, the results came in. I wasn't the father. When I read those words, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. With her. With the cycle. With the need to understand everything that hurt. I called Kala. She answered immediately like she'd been waiting. "It's not mine," I said softly. There was a pause on her end and then a quiet, "I know." I waited for more. For excuses. For tears. But none came. Instead, she simply whispered, "Then I'll stop reaching out. For real this time. Take care of yourself, Kala. You too, Merritt." And that was it. That night, I threw away the sonogram. Not in anger, in peace. It didn't belong to me. And neither did she. Not anymore. Weeks passed. The air in my apartment felt different. Brighter. Like it could finally breathe again. I caught myself humming while I made coffee, folding laundry with music on, smiling at texts from Talia without that familiar shadow of guilt or hesitation. Talia never tried to be my escape, and maybe that's why she became my peace. She never competed with Kala's memory. She simply existed beside it, slowly replacing grief with laughter, silence with understanding. One weekend, we took a trip upstate. A little cabin by a frozen lake, no cell service, just us and the sound of wind against pine. One morning, as we sipped coffee on the porch wrapped in blankets, she turned to me and asked, "Do you still think all that pain had to mean something?" I paused, then smiled. "No," I said. "It didn't have to mean anything. It just had to end." And I think that was the moment I truly let go. Not with a dramatic goodbye. Not with revenge. Not with closure tied up in a perfect bow. Just with acceptance. Kala had once told me she felt nothing. And I had let that define me for too long. But now I understood someone else's emptiness doesn't get to hollow you out. You choose what fills you. And this time I chose peace. I chose presence. I chose me. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, that was more than enough.